evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tez, and we are back once again with all the latest news and a couple of reviews for the week in horror. I hope everyone has been good. I hope everyone has had a nice week, no drama. Whatever you've been watching, reading, playing, it's all good. Hit us up on the Discord with your latest bits and bobs. I will need to put a link or find out whatever the title is of the Ministry of Horror Discord. It's in the MOS network. So I guess if you search MOS network on Discord, you'll find it. It'll be somewhere. Or alternatively on X, Ministry_Horror. Check it out. Give it a little look-see. So, in terms of what I've been up to, it's been just this last week has kind of just flown by. It's been so busy. Lots going on. Stresses here and there, but it's all good. It's all moving in the right direction. So everything is all good in that regard. In terms of gaming, we always normally talk a bit about gaming at the start of the show, or on the live streams, or also on these shows as well. I talk about gaming. I reinstalled on my PlayStation Elden Ring, not because I have any illusions about me being able to jump into the DLC. I mean, firstly, the DLC is like £40, which, if I'd completed Elden Ring, then I would probably still think that's quite steep. But more so, I've been watching a lot of videos where people have been, kicking ass, and I kind of thought, maybe I should give it another go. And I did actually have a little look at, what builds are recommended, or even just what base characters to start with are recommended. So I started a new game, even though I was level 42 or 47, which in grand scheme of things I don't think is very high. But I've done a fair few bosses. I was just getting to a point where I was like, I'm having to run through areas as quick as I can because I will just get killed straight away. And then I get to a boss and I'm just not doing much damage and I'm taking heavy damage, and I just thought, let's maybe try this a different way. So I started a new game. I started with a hero class. Hero starts like a massive axe, and I was just murking people. Like the first kind of training boss that you have, like tutorial boss, I think I 2-hit killed him, which he's not a tough boss at all. He very much does ease you into the game very gently, but still it was a lot quicker than it had been on my previous sort of play. So the idea in my head sort of crossed that maybe I could start streaming this, but I figured, you know what? Everyone that is streaming is going to be streaming Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. There's no point. No one wants to see me again attempt Elden Ring. And that was the only time that I've ever actually been trolled on Twitch, was when Elden Ring had come out and I picked up a copy, and I did start streaming it on my PlayStation from my old flat. And some nasty prick came into the chat and was just really quite mean. And I realised I really do have very, very thin skin. I'm not thin, of course, at all, as you can see, but very, very thin skin when it comes to trolling. So I was like, you know what? I'm maybe not going to stream this game anymore. So I've remembered that. I'm not going to go ahead and start streaming, and hopefully my blind doesn't start smacking me in the face if you're watching the video. It's very windy outside, but it's also very warm, so the window's open, the blind is down. In terms of other gaming news, so I played a little bit of that. I'm determined this month coming, the month of July, I should say, to really limit my expenditure, really limit my spending, and just really sort of tighten the purse strings, so to speak. And people will know that I'd been umming and ahhing for a while on getting Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. When that came out, I thought to myself, let's try and finish what I've already got first. So I jumped back into Final Fantasy 16. I had a great time, finished that, a couple of lulls in it when just, you had to do some, just go to this place and talk to these people missions. Slowed down the tempo a little bit, which was a shame, but by the end, really good game, really solid game, solid 8 out of 10. And so I thought, okay, let's jump back into Final Fantasy VII Remake, and which I'd previously been playing. I'd lost my save because my PlayStation ended itself, and when it came back I'd lost all my saves and that wasn't in the cloud. So I've been playing that on and off, and I got back up to the point where I'd previously got to before my save had vanished. But I don't know if I'm finding a bit of Final Fantasy fatigue, or if I'm just in a bit of an area of the game that I'm not that interested in. But yeah, I've kind of gone off the boil a little bit on that. It's gone a bit tepid, shall we say. So I put that to one side. But I have restarted playing Ghost of Tsushima. It's funnily enough, my barber was talking about him and a friend of his have been playing it, and I thought that is actually a pretty good game that I played a bit of quite a while ago. Never finished it. So got the director's cut upgrade. Brilliant, really enjoying that. So I've been playing a bit of that off stream. We've done a couple of little streams a little while ago of the Chant. It's not that good. And I did a stream last weekend of Resident Evil 0. I probably will try and jump a bit more into that. I mean, it's already like 45 minutes in, quite repetitive in terms of backtracking. I guess because of the location being a train where all you can do is go forwards or backwards, they've done what they can so far in terms of exploration, but it is a lot of run this way, run that way, switch the characters from Billy to, is it Billy? I don't know. Whatever, Rebecca and Billy. I mean, it was like £3, so I can't really complain. But we do kind of have some potential implications for streaming news. I finally got my lazy ass around to picking up a few HDMI cables and a few of these HDMI switches, because where my Xbox is, I've done one or two little streams before from my office space. So if you're doing a gaming stream, it obviously is better to have the better audio, microphone here, to have this kind of setup. But the problem is I don't play that many games on PC. I don't really play Football Manager on PC. I'm more of a console gamer, and I'm too lazy to always unplug things, plug things back in, switch things around, blah, blah, blah. So my Xbox is currently hooked up to a big TV that's on the wall right behind my monitors. That's great and everything. That's great for watching films. But when I play games here, because the wall behind me isn't that far back, so I can't really get that far away from the TV, I have to lean my chair right back, so I'm basically like lying down. And I just tend to find that within 20 minutes, half an hour of playing anything that requires my concentration, I just feel sick, which isn't great. So I kind of figured, you know what? Keep my TV there because it was a pain in the arse to have it put up. Use that for just like films, and then do some sort of HDMI thing into my monitor here that I use for my computer and also for work, my work laptop. But rather than having to constantly keep unplugging HDMI, plug in HDMI, blah, 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 I just set up this switch. And then, yeah, if I want to do a film or something like, like a 4K Blu-ray on my TV, I would just simply have to just go behind the Xbox, unplug, plug in. They're right next to each other. And I'm tempted even to use this other switch that I've got to kind of have that there, so I can literally just switch the outputs on the Xbox from TV to PC. And then on the PC side, I can switch between input of my laptop for work or my Xbox. So there's a big old ramble about a lot of boring stuff people probably won't care about. But it means that, one, I can now comfortably play on my Xbox because I can just sit here with my monitor, play it through that. Just so much better. So I think I will be jumping back into Alan Wake 2. I just found that I was just feeling I couldn't really get into it again. But now that I've sort of adjusted my setup so I can actually play a bit more comfortably, I'm thinking jump back into streaming that at some point. And then, try and get like a bit more regularity in, because otherwise I'm only then streaming on Twitch every other week, and what's the point really? And I know I've mentioned before possibly changing the streaming to YouTube, because I now use the YouTube channel for Ministry of Horror as opposed to just whatever. So who knows? I think let's make the use of it and try and get back into building a following over on Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Tezius, TEZZIUS. Anyway, so there we go. That's kind of up to date with gaming news. And also the reason that I think of mentioning that is because with the ease of this HDMI splitter right in front of me, when I do get around to doing some retro gaming, because now that I've got a Nintendo Wii, got a PS2, got an original Xbox, it will just be a bit easier to have it here. I mean, the only thing is the original Xbox, to a lesser extent the PS2, are flipping massive. So I take up a fair bit of desk space, so I probably just need to think about where things are going to go. But we have options now, I think, is the main thing. To finally do a retro stream, finally do this bonus gaming podcast. We will get around to it. Anyway, we've got some news to go through. We'll go through that in a moment. I do have to keep this short, and I say that every goddamn time, but I will try and keep this below an hour. I do like 45 minutes, just because of things to do. You know, there's a lot of busy stuff going on this weekend. I've spent like 5 hours this morning doing overtime, so it's just been crazy. But later on, we have got 2 reviews. One is a retro review because the film isn't modern, but I have finally been able to see Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. It's a film that I heard about a little while ago. It was a terrifying found footage film, but it was just never available on like Prime, even to purchase on like a BBFC release. I don't know if it has had a BBFC release, but it just wasn't really available. But that is now in the Prime store, so I rented it for like £3, which is very, very affordable. And the other film is the new release that I've been very hyped for a little while. No, not Longlegs. I will definitely want to see that when that comes out. But no, the other review we will have later on is In a Violent Nature. Going to be talking a bit about that. I will be going through the highs, lows, my opinions on the film, bit of the plot, and then my score out of 10. So without further ado, ghouls and fiends, it's now time for the Ministry of Horror news. This is the news. Ho, 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 ho.
This is God.
Might as well use this opportunity to have a swig of water again. Probably should say the importance of me having a swig of water is I had an annual blood test, and when I went for it, they were like, really struggling to find a vein, and I thought, well, that's not unusual. I quite often have that issue when I have like blood tests or whatever. And when she did find a vein, she goes, you might be a bit dehydrated right now. And I was like, oh, really? And she was just like, yeah, well, you probably are finding a lot more pain and discomfort, even though I didn't flinch or anything. She goes, you probably found a bit more pain and discomfort because it was quite difficult to get the needle in. And that usually is because of being dehydrated. It affects like your veins. So go and drink like 2 litres of water now, please. And I thought, okay. And as I'm walking out of there to my car, and I text my fiance, which she will love the fact that I'm getting into the habit now saying fiance and not girlfriend. Love you, Victoria. And as I was messaging her and walking back to my car, I was like, do you feel a little bit woozy actually? And I didn't realise that all I'd had that morning was an espresso, and that was it. Like normally in the morning, like I hadn't gone to the gym, but normally in the morning it's, you know, I get up, I have a pre-workout shake with some creatine, I go to the gym, BCAAs, have a post-workout protein shake or protein iso carb mix, and then have another coffee, but then also have some water because I have to take some like diabetes medication. Anyway, that's a lot of my morning routine usually, but on that morning, for whatever reason, I'd got up, started work, had an espresso, and I just didn't even think that I wasn't drinking anything, because in my head I was like, well, I should be pretty much fasted for this blood test. Turns out you don't really need to at all. So anyway, yeah, I was a bit dehydrated, so I'm really making more of a conscious effort to drink more water. Anyway, this is the latest in horror news. These are the 8 new horror movies releasing this week, including A Quiet Place prequel. As always, all my news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Be sure to check them out. Great news site, great source of editorials and all that stuff. This is from John Squires. So, Gravitas Ventures travels ahead into the year 2045 for their latest indie horror effort with The Hunger Games meets Slasher Arena Wars, released onto VOD outlets this past Tuesday. In the film from director Brandon Slagle, in 2045, convicted criminals are given the opportunity to compete on the world's #1 televised sporting event. They must survive 7 rooms and 7 of the most vicious killers in the country. If they win, they regain their freedom. Michael Madsen, John Wells, Robert Lasardo, and Eric Roberts star. It's an Eric Roberts film, and it's a Michael Madsen film, and I say that with the greatest respect in terms of it is a modern Eric Roberts and Michael Madsen film. That doesn't make me feel that it's going to have much quality. I have to be honest. They've done great. Michael Madsen's done great things in his career, but in terms of more recently, just make your own mind up. We won't stay on that for much longer. Anyway, next up, also released onto VOD outlets this past Tuesday is the Korean horror anthology Tastes of Horror, which Wellgo USA Entertainment presents to audiences here in the United States. Well, we're in the UK. Wellgo USA previews the Korean horror anthology features 10 short films directed by 5 of the most acclaimed directors of the genre in South Korea. The film is based on the same titled webtoon. I haven't heard that term before. Korean horror, we're going to be talking about one of them later on. They're pretty. You get some pretty good horror from that side of the world. I am not that familiar with. I've never heard of Tastes of Horror in terms of a webtoon, but give it a go. Next, the slasher sequel Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2 was unleashed into theatres this past March, and beginning today, June 26th, a few days late, the film is finally now available at home. Blood and Honey 2 is exclusively available on Amazon Video on demand. Deep within the 100-acre wood, a destructive rage grows as Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Owl, and Tigger find their home and their lives endangered. I feel we've talked about this blurb a number of times. I won't kind of go over it again. I feel also we've talked about, my feelings on these properties before. At some point, I will give them a watch, but I don't have enough interest to want to spend money on these things. So next up, spin-off prequel A Quiet Place Day 1 will be making its way into theatres this Thursday night, June 27th, and you can watch the final trailer from Paramount below on the website. Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, and Alex Wolff star in Day 1. Michael Sonoski heads to A Quiet Place to direct the new movie. Djimon Hounsou, who appeared in A Quiet Place Part 2, will reprise his role in Day 1. Entertainment Weekly detailed the upcoming movie's prequel storyline. Lupita Nyong'o stars as Sam, a woman who's on a day trip to New York City when the monsters arrive. As everything quickly goes to hell, she's thrown together with a man named Eric, played by Joseph Quinn. With some reluctance, the pair agree to navigate and survive the city together. The spin-off is based on an original idea by John Krasinski and Michael Sonoski, and it is written by Sonoski. Meanwhile, it's expected that the Abbott family storyline will become a trilogy, with Krasinski recently teasing that he has ideas for the 3rd film in the main series. The trailers for this do look good, and I feel that this probably will be a fun experience in the cinema, just because I do remember fondly the tension of the very first film. And the second film, I do think that maybe I need to give it a rewatch. I just remember watching the second film and thinking, okay, the prequel element of it was good, seeing the Abbott family when it all kicked off very briefly. I just didn't think the second one was quite as good. I don't think it's a bad film, I just don't think it's quite as good, and I felt the finale was quite abrupt. So, but the trailers for this look good, so I imagine it's going to be a good experience in the cinema. Next up, Oscilloscope Laboratories has picked up US distribution rights to Adrian Bio's The Vordelak, and the acclaimed 18th century vampire tale is releasing this week. The film opens this Friday, June 28th, so yesterday, at New York City's IFC Center with writer-director Adrian Bue in attendance. It's adapted from Alexei Konstantinovich Tolstoy's 1839 Gothic horror novella, The Family of the Vordelak, which actually predates Bram Stoker's Dracula Why can't I talk today? By over half a century. In the upcoming film, when the Marquis d'Urfé, a noble emissary of the King of France, is attacked and abandoned in the remote countryside, he finds refuge at an eerie, isolated manor. The resident family, reluctant to take him in, exhibits strange behaviour as they await the imminent return of their father, Gonjiam. But what begins simply as strange quickly devolves into full-fledged nightmare when Gonjiam returns, seemingly no longer himself. The original novella also served as the basis for one of the segments in Mario Bava's 1963 horror anthology film Black Sabbath, which was titled The Vœu de Lac. That sounds pretty interesting. Now, funnily enough, I did see on some sort of best horrors so far of 2024 list a mention of the Vœu de Lac, and I thought, well, I haven't heard anything about this, but sounds pretty interesting. I will give it that. I'm not normally a big fan of period pieces, but I'm open to giving it a watch, especially if it's got some good buzz about it. Also releasing this week to home is Ishana Night Shyamalan's feature, The Watchers. I kind of feel like we've talked about this a few times recently. Doesn't fill me with a lot of interest, but it's coming home. So there you go. Austrian filmmakers Veronika Franz and Severin Fiala, who did The Lodge and Goodnight Mommy, are back with The Devil's Bath, and it's coming exclusively to Shudder on June 28th. So I did wonder about watching this, but I didn't have enough time. It's an over 2-hour film, so it is on Shudder in the UK, I can confirm. Shot on 35mm, The Devil's Bath is based on historical records, and the film debuted at Berlinale this year, where it was awarded a Silver Bear for Martin Schlatt's cinematography. Here's the official plot synopsis for the German-language horror movie. In 1750 Austria, a deeply religious woman named Agnes has just married her beloved, but her mind and heart soon grow heavy as her life becomes a long list of chores and expectations. Day after day, she's increasingly trapped in a murky and lonely path leading to evil thoughts, until the possibility of committing a shocking act of violence seems like the only way out of her inner prison. Anja Plasch, David Scheid, Maria Hofstadter, Camilla Schailan, and Lorenz Trobinger star. And then, finishing up the list, after being released exclusively in theatres just last month, the unique, extremely gruesome slasher movie In a Violent Nature is coming home to VOD outlets this Friday, June 28th. In the film, well, actually, no, we'll just talk about this later on. Yeah, there's no point in me sort of talking about the blurb because we'll be talking about that in the review section. So, hey, that means we can move on to the next bit of news. Which, saying that news piece has just disappeared. So let's just quickly go back to the home page, because I don't know what I just accidentally closed because I was clicking things too quickly. I don't know what I've just closed. Oh, there we go. No, bollocks. Okay, fine. We'll have a very short news week then, because oh yeah, that's what it was. So next up in the news, seamless. Listing for the House of the Dead 2 remake appears on ESRB website. Comes from Mike Wilson. After Forever Entertainment and Microids released their remake of Sega classic The House of the Dead back in 2022, fans have obviously been waiting for the sequel, which is also announced as getting the remake treatment. Things have obviously been quiet since the first game's release, but now it appears that the ESRB has given us an indication that The House of the Dead 2 remake is on its way. Per the ESRB website, there's now a listing for The House of the Dead 2 remake for the Nintendo Switch. No release date has been provided. This follows the PEGI website having a similar listing for the game for European fans. As you might expect, the listing has The House of the Dead 2 remake being assigned a mature rating with the following description. This is a rail shooter-like game, gun game, in which players assume the role of an agent in search of a missing colleague in Venice, Italy. From a first-person perspective, navigate through the city while using pistols to shoot and kill zombies and mutant creatures. Killing creatures often results in decapitation and or dismemberment with large blood splatter effects. Combat is often fast-paced and accompanied by gunfire, screams of pain, and large explosions. A handful of sequences depict civilians attacked and killed by enemy creatures. The House of the Dead remake was initially released for the Switch back in 2022, with it eventually receiving ports for the PS4, PS5, and Xbox Series. I do vaguely remember the House of the Dead games back in the day as arcade staples. I don't think I ever picked up the light gun games at home. I think the only game that I ever had as a light gun game would have been like Time Crisis 2. And I remember that being fun and everything, but yeah, I never really got on with the home style of light gun shooters. So with that said, I never really kind of got too into the House of the Dead series, which would have been right up my street being horror, but yeah, not really my thing. I don't really know how that they translate to Switch. I mean, I kind of feel part of these games, the gimmick is quick reloading, swinging your gun around. I don't know, maybe it does work with switches and motion controls, but or if you're just playing a handheld, I don't really know what the point would be. But hey, if you're a fan, we're getting the second game remade. Arrow Video is bringing Friday the 13th remake to 4K Ultra HD with new bonus features. John Squires writes up, can you believe it's now been 15 years since Jason Voorhees last appeared on the big screen? Arrow Video is celebrating that sad anniversary with some great news, bringing the 2009 remake of horror classic Friday the 13th to 4K Ultra HD this summer. The release is scheduled for September 17th and is up for pre-order now. Arrow Video previews the upcoming release. In 2003, director Marcus Nispel made a lasting impression on horror fans with his box office topping remake, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. 6 years later, he turns his camera to another slasher icon, none other than the hulking masked killer Jason Voorhees, in his gore-soaked remake of Friday the 13th. Nispel's taunt direction and the stunning cinematography by Daniel Pearl, whose credits include the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well as the remake, bring a fresh and terrifying new perspective to the infamous hockey-masked maniac, sure to bring chills and thrills to even hardened horror veterans. So, I'll just quickly go through a couple of the additions on the special features. On the 4K disc, there are 2 cuts of the film, the theatrical cut, 97 minutes, and the extended killer cut, 105 minutes. There's a double-sided fold-out poster, limited edition greetings from Crystal Lake postcards, an illustrated collector's booklet, reversible sleeve featuring the original and newly commissioned artwork by Gary Pollan. A whole bunch of extras, loads of interviews, audio commentaries. I would be tempted. I'm trying not to buy any new collection items. I'm trying to be good. But I do enjoy the Friday the 13th remake, and this does look... I mean, Arrow releases, what more can you say? I think they're always pretty good at smashing it out the park. Next up, and finally, I should say, in the horror news, Japanese-made splatter horror game Cruelty is available now. Mike Wilson writes up, Gorehound gamers who polished off the Saw-inspired Gore Doctor when it was released back in March have another title to indulge their love of splatter, with Japanese indie developer 838's Maniacs Cruelty. Available now on Steam, the Epic Game Store, and itch.io, Cruelty offers up short but sweet gameplay that mixes survival horror, with stealth. The story for Cruelty is admittedly pretty simplistic. You were in an accident and lost consciousness. Upon waking up, you find yourself in an abattoir ruled by madness. To survive, you must solve numerous mysteries in this world of fear while evading the gaze of monstrous beings as you progress. As mentioned, instead of engaging in combat with enemies, Cruelty has players progressing through stages by solving puzzles while remaining out of sight from threats. A typical session ranges from 30 to 60 minutes, with your survival hinging on escaping or concealing oneself. Featuring a manhunt-like gritty third-person perspective, Cruelty is fully voiced for an immersive experience, as well as having immersive high-quality graphics utilising the latest game engine technology. I mean, just even seeing the image that's on the Bloody Disgusting website looks pretty gnarly. There's just a table with various body parts and ribs on it. It looks like it's single-player, and that has my interest. Typical session ranging from 30 to 60 minutes, survival hinging on escaping or concealing oneself. Now that doesn't fill me with too much interest, just because I imagine it would be quite tense, but that's starting to sound a bit like Outlast, and I just didn't really get on with the Outlast games. They were great for building tension and scares, of course, but I like to be able to fight back. So, not for me. Anyway, Ghouls and Fiends, that is it on the horror news. was the news. Oh.
You hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand? This is God.
Boom. We've done it. We've done the news. Smashing through it. Just hitting half an hour. I don't know if that's good for time or not. Anyway, we're going to jump straight into our horror review section. Bosh. Straight in the reviews are kind of semi-retro review. And I know I discussed on last week's show that I was going to try and squeeze in a retro review, and I'd started watching Brain Scan. I haven't finished Brain Scan yet, so we couldn't do that for today. And I figured if I tried to finish it today before recording the show, I've got to go out this evening. I'm just going to end up running out of time. So we're going to save Brain Scan. We will be reviewing Brain Scan. But our not so retro review, because it's only a few years old, is the 2018 South Korean found footage supernatural horror film Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, directed by Jung Bum-shki, based on a real-life psychiatric hospital of the same name. It stars Wee Ha-jun, Park Ji-hyun, Oh Ah-yeon, Moon Yi-won, Park Seung-hoon, Yoon Ji-yoon, and Lee Seong-wook in the lead roles. The narrative centers around a horror web series crew that travels to an abandoned asylum for a live broadcast to garner views and publicity, unaware that what they'll encounter will be the last thing they'll ever see. The film opened theatrically in South Korea on 28th of March 2018 and the United States on the 13th of April 2018. Commercial success, it also became the third most watched horror film in South Korea after A Tale of Two Sisters and Phone. So, straight off the bat, my initial kind of thoughts when I think similarities, and I don't know when did Grave Encounters come out? 2011, so Grave Encounters does predate this by 7 years, but I don't think to read too much into that, because in the world of found footage, you can look at similarities everywhere, and we're now moving into the stage of found footage utilizing people being online and streaming and so on and so forth. And you know, a little while ago, the Shudder release of Deadstream, that's the similar sort of concept, going to a haunted location for a live stream, for filming for a show, which is what they did in Grave Encounters, and coming across nasties. So the concept we're starting to see a few of, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think that's a really rich source of scares when done well. And Grave Encounters, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Like, there's a bit of CGI in there, but it's not too heavy, and it's the sort of CGI where it's like elongated mouths and, you know, things like that. It doesn't happen that often. You don't see it for that long for it to look corny. Like, everything looks pretty good, really. And with this, there isn't really CGI, but we certainly do get the scares. So the film opens with two boys recording their exploration of the abandoned Gonjiam psychiatric hospital, where rumours state that the ping pool loving director of the hospital killed all the patients and went missing. The two head to room 402, the intensive care unit, which no one has been able to open before. They try to open the door but suddenly hear a ping pong ball. Their broadcast abruptly ends, but not before catching a glimpse of a ghostly face. After seeing news of the teenager's disappearance, Ha-jun, owner of YouTube channel Horror Times, decides to explore the building. Ha-jun gets together a group of 6 people, 3 girls, Ah-yeon, Charlotte, and Ji-hyun, and 3 boys, Sung-hoon, Sung-wook, and Ji-yoon, for a live broadcast. Ha-jun stays at their base camp off the road to control the broadcast while the rest of the group will go inside. It's then revealed to the audience, but not the live stream viewers or the women in the group, that Ha-jun, Sung-hyun, and Seung-wook have scripted out this ghost hunting scenario just like all their previous Horror Times videos, including planting scares for the viewers and women to react to. So we'll kind of we won't go too much further into that, because that becomes then the bulk of the film and the scares. But kind of similar to Grave Encounters, which didn't just have the similarities of going to a haunted, abandoned psychiatric building, or haunted asylum, but also that there were plans to kind of plant scares and falsify things for the views, you know, to get the content. That was something that they were initially going to be doing in Grave Encounters before realizing that things were actually real. And that's kind of what happens here. But we get some great shots of drone footage. I mean, it's all pretty much, it is all basically shot from like handy cams, GoPros, static cameras that have been set up for security and to monitor other angles. This is quite a slow burn, but perfectly kind of crafted found footage film in that we spend a good amount of time getting to know the characters and their personalities and how they can kind of bounce off each other. Spend a good bit of time getting to know the location and finding out little bits of history about it. And they really do wait till the last third of the film to start bringing in the actual scares. Sometimes with found footage, you can find it where the horror starts halfway through the film or even earlier than that. And then you're then in this fight for survival with the characters from that point. And I think that can work incredibly well. I think that can be a great way to put you on edge as the viewer. But I also like this approach of building the repertoire and the relationship between the characters for the viewer and understanding their different motivations, like especially the guy who is Captain Ha-Jun, that's kind of how he's referred, how obsessive he becomes as the film progresses, because ultimately they're looking to hit a high number of live viewers, because you get a higher number of live viewers, you get more ad revenue, which ultimately it's more money in the pocket. And he kind of, you don't know if he's maybe also being overcome by something, or if it's just his true colors are showing as the film progresses, but he becomes quite intense in terms of wanting no one to deviate from the plan, which is build up the tension, go to these different rooms, and then head to room 402, and we're going to get that door open and go in there. There's some pretty neat effects in this. There's moments where in one of the rooms there's like water on the ceiling, but it's almost like there's like kind of like a pool or a lake or something on the ceiling. It's done very, very effectively. And there's one particular scare where a woman is being chased through the woods after trying to escape and encountering a really, really creepy moment with another character. And they eventually find the tent, which is the home base sort of thing. That's like, it's not like a tent, like a 2-person tent, but it's like a proper, this is our home base settlement that you can walk around in. But she goes in there, she's back in the asylum, and you just get this moment when she's panning around her flashlight, and you kind of cut between the flashlight and then her kind of GoPro that's facing her for her to talk to and reactions and stuff. But for the longest time, it's focused on her flashlight. She's panning the room and sees this like naked but sort of almost mutilated person just stood in the room in the corner, like behind a pillar. And it's like she's moving the camera away, and she's trying to find a door to open, and as she sort of pans back, it kind of looks like this figure is a bit closer. Really, really great approach to building up tension to such a fever pitch. I wouldn't really say there's anything kind of negative that I found with this. I mean, there were a few moments where I sort of looked at my phone just out of force of habit, and you can easily miss key points of dialogue because this is a Korean film. I was watching it in subtitles. I imagine there might be a dubbing version, but on the Prime store, I didn't look. I just went with the original language recording. But that's on me. That's not a fault of the film. There's a lot of highlights, really. I would say I think the final 20 minutes or so of the film, final half an hour really of the film, is just a really white knuckle thrill ride of fear, and I really liked what they were going for with this. Oh, and I'm just reading up on the Wikipedia, and the epilogue is advising something which I hadn't quite picked up on, but I won't read out because it's a bit of a spoiler for the end of the film, but I will have another look at that after the show just to kind of confirm that. But in regards to this film, I would say if you enjoy a good Korean horror, if you like found footage, definitely give it a go. It's kind of got that urbex feel, and there was a period where I used to quite like urbex videos, urban exploration videos on YouTube. I haven't watched any in a while because I was going through looking at various ones that were just kind of crap and staged and like fake interactions, and I just think that just I mean, yeah, you'll get people who go, oh my god, that's so freaky. It's like, yeah, but it's bullshit, it's not real. Like, who encounters like a murderer in an abandoned building and then runs away and keeps turning around for a framed shot of the killer chasing them? That is absolute bullshit. Like, if you encountered something, you would run for your life. It's just nonsense. And you get people who buy it because they're absolutely just morons, quite frankly. But nevertheless, like, you get a lot of urban exploration videos, and some of them are really good, some of them just cheesy for the sake of it. But this setting, I think, works brilliantly, and it's just, yeah, the final half an hour of this film, I think, is incredible. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. I definitely think check it out if you are a fan of found footage films, Korean horror. Give it a go. And then the main review for this afternoon, is In a Violent Nature, which is a 2024 Canadian slasher film written and directed by Chris Nash and starring Ry Barrett, Andrea Pavlovich, and Laurie Marie Taylor. Described as an ambient slasher, it follows a mute killer who's resurrected from his grave in the Ontario wilderness by a group of teenagers, whom he then begins stalking and murdering. The events depicted are largely observed from the killer's perspective. So, looking at the plot, a group of friends discovers a locket hanging in the remains of a fire tower. One of them, Troy, pickpockets it. Moments later, the corpse of Johnny rises from the ground. Enraged, he begins his search for the locket and walks through the woods. He pauses at the sight of a rotting fox corpse and hears a nearby argument between two men, one of whom set the traps that killed the fox. Johnny walks to a house and enters unnoticed. When he sees a necklace that he mistakes for his locket, he has a brief memory of his father. The homeowner soon returns, but is horrified by Johnny and runs away. In the woods, he gets his leg stuck in his own bear trap and is killed by Johnny. Later, Johnny hears a car in the distance and pursues it. Yeah, I'll pause there. So this was one of the... There's a lot of great shots in this film, and this had an incredible transition. So, as mentioned, the majority of the film is kind of from Johnny's perspective. So we're following behind him, kind of like if you were playing Resident Evil 4, but you were walking instead of running everywhere. It has that kind of almost over-the-shoulder or just right behind the character appearance perspective. And this director isn't afraid to linger on shots. To an extent where it can be between artistic and perversely grotesque, as some of the moments later on in this film. When Johnny is pursuing this homeowner, and you're basically just following behind Johnny, you get these moments of these like kind of wide perspective shots where you can just see him, static camera, and you can see him following after a particular character. And then these other shots behind him, so it's not all just over the shoulder shooting. And this guy has tripped and he's got his leg stuck in one of his own bear traps, and he falls down, he's screaming, he's crying, like, leave me alone, just please don't touch me. And you see Johnny's hand, and it's close up of Johnny's hand reaching forward towards the guy's face. Super quick transition, like a quick cut to his hand still pursuing, but now in a house, and now his hand is drenched in blood as it goes to pick this locket up, which he thinks is the locket from the very start of the film. But he looks at it and the locket just says "Number 1 motherfucker," and it's not his locket. So we then follow him as he is then going after this group of, I won't say teens, I'll say early 20s. It's like there's a few of them, a few lads, a few girls who have gone camping. And this is where we get some exposition. One of them around the campfire tells a tale about what happened in these woods. So we get a bit of exposition as to potentially Johnny's backstory through this tale of a massacre that occurred some 10 or 20 years ago. I won't say about that because you can watch the film for yourself and get that exposition yourself, but we do get some development in regards to who this kind of character is. And we find out later on the film, kind of just, it's almost like a third-person perspective of Jason, and not so much in regards to his story is the same as Jason's at all, but in terms of if you're watching a Friday the 13th film and you hear other characters telling our protagonists that, oh, 20 years ago this occurred and blah, 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 and this whole massacre happened and it had to be stopped because they're the locals who have lived it and know it, telling our protagonists who are out-of-towners. But in this, we hear those conversations, but from a distance as Johnny's approaching, which I think was a really, really neat touch. As mentioned earlier on today in the Discord, this is a film I was watching today, and it does feature one of the most insane on-screen deaths I think I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot of horror films. I won't describe the death because you have to see it to believe it. And also, I don't really even know how I could describe exactly what happens because a lot goes on in the space of like 20 seconds. It is gnarly. There is one particular death that I will mention where a certain character from Johnny's past is introduced. There's a bit of a moment where it's not exactly clear what Johnny has done to this person. I think the implication is he's broken their back, but it isn't exactly clear at that moment what he's done. It kind of just looks like he's lifting them from the ground. But then he drags said character into this woodshed where there's like an automated log cutting device. So what it is it's like a long trail, like a long metal kind of feeding kind of tray where you would put a log and then you'd push a lever and that lever would push this like pneumatic axe head down that would just then slice through the log like butter. And it's such a prolonged sequence, this, where he lays the character down who is, I'm guessing, paralyzed from what's occurred. He lays their arm across this device and just pushes the lever. The axe slowly comes down and then cuts that person's hand off. Horrible. And then he pulls the lever back to bring it back to its neutral position, lumbers around to where this body is, repositions them so their head is on the tray. I can hear a lot of movement downstairs, and I'm the only person here. I'll go and I'll check that out in a minute. We're not too far away from the end of the show. No idea what the hell's going on downstairs. It's just the dogs, but I'm hearing a lot of banging around. For God's sake. He positions this person's head on it, and then he pushes the lever down, and it's just horrible. The axe head goes down. There's obviously some resistance, but the camera shot is just static. Like, it's just static as this horrible death is occurring on screen. Music is one of the things that I normally comment on. There wasn't that much music in Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. There's some moments when the guys and the gals are getting together and chatting. We got some background music. Don't know if that was just edited in as part of their web series, whatever, I don't know. But not much music in that. Similar to this, there isn't really much score. And that makes sense because for the most part we are following Johnny. And when it says about ambient horror slasher, it's because a lot of the film, the only sound you hear is Johnny's crunching footsteps through the woods, buzzing of bees, and just that sort of background ambience of the forest. And it does look lush, like the whole wilderness looks incredible in this film. The acting is generally pretty good. There's a couple of victim reactions where the acting wasn't great. Not terrible to the extent that it would reduce the enjoyment of the film, but just a couple of moments that were just okay. Noticeably not that good, is all I'll say. The kills in this, though, which for a slasher film is kind of, I guess, the focal point, the kills in this are incredible. There is a variety of kills that are just so violent. it's just it's sickening in places. But if you know what you're going in for, then it's okay. It's good. But if you're not that au fait with splatter, uber gore, and intense violence, you may have a tough time with this. If you've seen something like Terrifier 2, then, you know, this is probably not quite in that range. Like, this is a little more serious than Terrifier 2. But I really did enjoy the fact that we are following from the killer's perspective, and it's not a case of making the killer the protagonist and the protagonist the antagonist. It's not really that at all. It's basically just, instead of watching Friday the 13th and following the protagonists who get interrupted by Jason murdering them, we are following the antagonist who is coming across the protagonists at various points, whether he's watching them or whether he's pursuing them and murdering them. So that just gives it such a unique spin that we're following the person that's normally in the background and appearing. I did like that. I would have to say the only thing that does lower the score a bit on this slightly is the ending. There is an epilogue that occurs in the finale that goes on for so long. And I get what they were trying to do with the epilogue and how that story could be in relation to what is going on in a character telling a story in an epilogue to another character, and how that could connect to the events of the film. Again, trying to be vague, not to give anything away of the plot. But it was just... It was just, I didn't really enjoy that. I didn't really enjoy that part of the film that much. It did feel like pulling teeth a bit. That may well have been the point, but it didn't do anything for me at that point. But that being said, I do think that this is a really good modern slasher. I really like this ambient slasher approach. I'd like to see more things like that, but I don't necessarily want things to be knockoffs of in a violent nature. But just that approach of, it's not a slasher with really over-the-top jump scares and over-the-top stabs of music in line with stabs and whatever. Like, this was just pretty visceral and tempered. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I think the only thing that drops it down from being like an 8.5 is some of the acting isn't amazing. And as I said, the epilogue, I do feel the epilogue dragged it down a little bit for me. But that is it for this week's edition of the Ministry of Horror. Be sure to go to X and follow us at ministry_horror. Give us a follow there. Give us a tweet with review requests that you may have, anything like that. We are on Discord. Search for the MOS Arena, and you'll find the sub channel for Ministry of Horror. Or if you need a link, message on the Twitter, and I'll sort a link out. Also on TikTok, ministry.of-horror. I occasionally put up clips of the show and maybe other various bits, such as like my book collection or Blu-rays, or maybe clips from gaming if I get around to doing any gaming. And you can check me out on Instagram as well, Tez Elliott, TEZZELLIOTT. That's it for another edition of the Ministry of Horror, Ghouls and Fiends. I will catch you again next time. Goodbye.